Merry Christmas. Hello, everyone. Well, this is it. It's the last stream for me for 2017. So, last time we met, well, not we, but you guys decided you wanted to talk about the Rocketeer jacket. So, this is where I'm at with it. So I definitely want to discuss some of the ways that I went about doing this. It's not done, obviously. I like to block out, specifically when I'm dealing with cloth, I like to first block out the things and the items, give the supporting geometry that maybe I want to use. So, well, with that said, as you can see, I decided to do a bust as well, because I also want to show that you can make as an artist, that you can make one piece and then you can make it into multiple products. So my ultimate goal for him, of course, again, is I wanted to make my own collectible. And now I've decided I also want to have a bust, because then I want to make it maybe a little bit bigger. So there'll be actually I might even get crazy and do like pretty much a one-to-one bust. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a dream I have, people. It's a dream, which I have many. So I've decided I want to do that. So I'm just trying to finish this off. And then I'm going to use this same model to make also that collectible I've been talking about. Thanks for the hat. Some on the way. And then also I wanted to turn this into actually bookends, because I've got all these art books and I kind of want to start making my own bookshelf and things. I don't want to use Marvelous Designer, Dragon, because I want to do it in ZBrush. And I kind of want to, for me, the more I force myself to learn how the clothing lays and not let something like Marvelous Designer do it for me, the more I find myself improving on my sculpting abilities. And specifically, it's just, for me, it's a study. As well, it's a study of a leather, because leather is going to react a lot different than, say, cotton, right? So that's what it's all about for me at this point, for when I'm working on a lot of artwork as well. It isn't just about making the pieces, it's about doing some studies. So I want to cover, like, I started detailing this. It's the start of it. So you can see this is all ZBrush, so it's not done yet. So they give you ideas of what I'm doing here. Okay, and because there's a metal plate here, so that's why the leather's going to bunch up a lot right there. And then there's padding in here, which is why it's puffy a little bit. So just like on the front here, there's some padding there. So that's why we have that. So I want to cover some brushes that I made specifically for the cloth, for the jacket. I want to cover some techniques that I'm using in essence, to make these kind of pieces here, right in here. Okay. Which is also right there. And I want to cover the base, because I think this was a fun for me, little project as well, that I wanted to do and figure out what kind of base would I make. So this is the one I've decided on, but I'm going to be honest with you. I went through like 8 or 9 iterations, and I'm going to show all those iterations to you. Okay? So I want to start with, first of all, welcoming you, and thanks for always tuning in. And again, this is going to be my last stream for this year, 2017. I won't be back until January. So this is it. We're making a little Rocketeer. You see our 4 next possible items that you guys can vote on. So we have prep for 3D printing, specifically for production. So that's this guy. I'm planning to 3D print him and then show the processing, the keying. Because like, if you really look at this, if you start diving the jetpack down alone, it's actually pretty complex print, because you have so many hollowing parts where there's no surface, and then you got to think this has got to be 3D printed. There's a bunch of supports that are going to happen. So I want to cover how I am going to break that up so that it can be printed, is the one thing I'm going to do. So that's all part of that first topic, prep for 3D printing, keying up, hollowing things out that I want to hollow out, and items like that. And then obviously you have VDM brushes, which are the vector displacement mesh brushes, which I'm actually going to touch on them a little bit today, ironically. And then the Gizmo 3D, because there's more to the Gizmo than just moving and scaling and rotating. There's other things that you can do. And then also using HD geometry, because as I'm traveling through certain studios, specifically a lot of film studios, HD geometry becomes extremely useful, because you can get to 1 billion. That's with the B. With the B. It's a really bad B, but with the B. Polygons and showing a structure. And in fact, there's even nice workflows for using HD geometry for 3D printing, actually. So that's why I put that topic up there, because I see it being used in the film industries, and I've found there's a nice workflow for 3D printing it as well. So it really comes together. Okay. So what I want to do now is just show you. Let's start really simple. Okay. And starting with this shoulder piece. Well, actually, you know what? Looking at these pieces here, right? If you look, again, I'm staying very low polygon. And I'm doing this on purpose for myself, because I want to have some control of the polygons, make some big shift movements. And then I want to take advantage of creasing. So if you look at just this piece alone, right, it is very simple. It's nothing, right, that is crazy and that is out of hand. You know, all these little buttons, see, they're floating right now because I'm going to start sculpting the leather up. So this is what I mean by I'm just laying down foundation. It's almost like I'm making sure my proportions are right for this. I'm making sure I'm putting things where I want them to go. Before I start diving in deep into sculpting, I really take my approach to cloth is almost like an approach to taking just in digital sculpting in general for me. Where what I mean by that is when I'm working on this, you know what, let's also, just so people know what our topic is for today, Mr. Rocketeer Boy, let's do like I did last time. Let's put a little snippet over here so people know what we're working on. I don't know why I'm doing that voice, but just go with it, people. Here, let's make them a little bit smaller so we can show a front view and a 3/4 of what we're working on. And I'm also going to talk about why that floor grid is sitting so low. I think that's important to understand. So we'll do something like that. And then let's do the back. All right, put a little snippet there. So, whoops, so people know this is what we are working on. All right, so we're turning off the live booleans. Okay, and you can see this big cube here. I'm actually using live booleans to do something for me when I was building the bases, and I'll show you what that is. Okay, so again, back to my philosophy here about thinking about cloth for me, okay, is when we're sculpting, right, if we just take something very rudimentary, let's just say even a sphere here, and if I load a sphere and I want to start sculpting with this, okay, you know, real quick, I'm going to turn off my quick saves because I don't need that saving while we're working. And percentagely, most of us that are using ZBrush will use this handy dandy Dynamesh mode, right? Because it's pretty much the most popular feature in ZBrush. It should be an extremely very cool feature that we use. So I see this Dynamesh phase as kind of like my quick blocking out, figuring things out, and I like to interpret it in the world of the real world clay, where we got to create some armature wire first, and then we start just grabbing some hot clay, and then we start throwing it on that armature wire, right, and start building up our surface, right? So I see that as like the blocking out phase, you know, what I'm doing right now, I'm blocking out a nose really quick, right? I see this as the first 20% of sculpting, and that's also what I see Dynamesh's main goal, and that's its main feature is Dynamesh is really conceptually thought of as more of a way for us to get that first 20% that have no limitations to the clay, have unlimited clay, push and pull, and when I need more clay, I just re-Dynamesh, right? So if I start creating some crazy nose, even though it's not Halloween anymore, right? Some kind of crazy witch's nose or something like that, like this, right? I know that I can re-Dynamesh, right, to do this. So I'm taking this same idea and this same approach to cloth. So for me, that's why I'm not at the stage yet where I've got a lot of cloth detail on him, because for me, I wanted to block out my clothing first. So if you look at even the jacket part here, okay? So if we click on this and here, this is when you guys have 2.5D and you have live booleans, this is what's going to happen, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the live booleans. All right, so we don't have to worry about that, and for now, I'll just turn off that little, we don't need that, okay? So looking at this piece, right, number one, if you look, it's pretty low geometry, it's not very dense, and if you notice, I don't have any thickness yet. I find when I'm blocking out some cloth, I don't put any thickness on it at all, and it's because there are at least, I can think of, 2 features, 3 features right off the top of my head right now where I can easily grab thickness with pretty much one click, right? So this is a fun-filled thing for you guys to know. I don't know if it's a fun-filled fact, but we'll go with it, okay? And then the reason why I like to just have a single surface with no thickness is when we do start sculpting on this, right? I've seen this again and again and again. When you start grabbing this and you start sculpting on that, if you have an inner thickness already, you're going to also, in a lot of cases, grab that internal thickness part. So what I mean by that is if we, here, let's give this thing some thickness, right? So because I'm pretty low polygon, all I have to do is go to ZModeler, right? And I'm going to Q mesh. And I'm going to say all polygons. Okay, so if I wanted to go inward, I can do this, and I'm seeing my thickness right here that I'm getting right off the bat. Now, the thing to keep in mind, if I'm going to do that push in with the ZModeler, okay, let me turn something off here. The double, you can see that the mesh is flipped, right? Because the normals are going now inward. Right? That's not a big deal to me because I know I can fix it pretty easily, and I can fix it right here. I just hit flip, and then you see it's back to being normal. So what happens is when you're doing this little technique that I'm showing, because I'm pushing in, right? I've got a normal, let's say it's facing the camera, right? It's facing this way. And then now we're pushing that in. So obviously we're making new geometry that's going inward, and now those normals are facing this way. And then now that face that used to be facing the camera is now actually facing me, right? And so you're not seeing this face that's here anymore because by default, ZBrush is only going to show the normals that are facing the camera. Well, that's probably pretty cool to watch. Okay, so this is why if you turn off double, okay, and then if I start pushing this in, you can see it happen live, what's going on. But then all I got to do is hit this little flip, and then ZBrush is flipping the normals for me. Okay, so the reason why I like to start with just a thin plane of nothing is because of this. One of my big brushes for sculpting for me is using like a brush like clay buildup. Okay, so if we begin to say, hey, let's actually apply these dynamic, right? And I start sculpting like this. Yeah, we're looking at this and thinking about, okay, where are my tension points? Okay, there's some tension in here that I want to start laying down, building up some surface in here maybe. You know, there's some kind of tensioning in there, right? So the thing that's going to happen is, depending on your thickness, you can start grabbing the internal portion, right? You see right now I'm pretty good, right? But if I start going a little bit bigger and I start getting a lot stronger with my stroke, see, now I'm starting to grab that internal surface, okay? So I don't want that to happen, right? So of course, for those of you that are veteran ZBrush users now on this right now watching, we can turn on something to stop that, right? Obviously. So in the brush palette, okay, we can go down here to our auto masking, right? And we can say backface mask. So that's going to tell ZBrush that you can only actually sculpt on the normals that the camera can see. So if it can't see the internal surface, right? Unless I do something like this, then we can see that internal surface. It can't sculpt. So if I do this, see, no matter how hard I do this, you can see nothing's happening out here. And vice versa. No matter how strong and how much I build up that, it's not going to touch the internal portion. Okay? So for me, when I'm doing my cloth, I prefer actually this. I prefer to stay completely no thickness on at all, period. Okay? And then that way, when I do go to apply this, even if I start sculpting the cloth areas and I start building up that surface, and like I said, I like to do this kind of like a study and say, oh, let's make this have a little bit bigger of a ridge and start bringing in some cloth, right? I'm gonna start doing this stuff. I know if I switch to even something very strong like an inflate, right, to maybe sell that seam a little bit more, I know I don't have to worry about an internal thickness there, because I'm going to be able to throw that thickness on down the road, no problem at all. Okay, so besides using something like ZModeler, the things everyone you got to think about too is even extract can give me my thickness, right? All I got to do is hit extract, right, and then ZBrush is like, you can see how thick this is, ridiculous now, but you can see how thick it's getting. So I can just use extract to give me my thickness if I want to, right? And then I have a thickness slider here, and that thickness slider can be positive or negative. So I can even say a negative 0.005, let's try for this model, and let's extract, and let's see, there, that's perfect actually. I kind of like that. That's perfect, right? I like that thickness, because keep in mind, I'm looking at 3D printing this guy, so there's a different parameter and different thought process I have to this, okay? So for me, that's perfect. So this is where I like to work with the cloth in this sense, okay? I like to have where specifically something like this, the jacket, which has a collar, like I have here on my sweatshirt or whatever you want to call this these days. Okay, this for me makes sense, and then I can turn off and then see it's gone. So hello, DMTBUDDAR, Buddha. How are you doing? So thanks for tuning in, everybody, by the way. Okay, so this is kind of the foundation I want to lay about where I'm at with him, and why I haven't really dove into creating very more realistic leather folding that's going on, because I'm not done laying it out. I still have one more piece I want to lay out. So in the back here, right, the Rocketeer, this piece is going to come off the back more and create kind of like a bend in the cloth. And there's another piece to his jacket back here that I still need to put on. So this is the last thing I need to do, and then I'll be going to the cloth. And so next year, or the next time we meet, which again, for those that are just tuning in, this is my last stream for 2017. Hopefully I'll have all the leather done and sculpted, and I'll have them posed, and then I'll be able to show different, because for this guy also, I'm going to cut off the shoulders. I'm not going to keep the shoulders where they are. I just want to create a bust with limited shoulders, maybe put a little shoulder turn, a little maybe a head, maybe do the the typical hero pose. Well, that's not really a typical hero pose, but you get my drift. Okay, so that's the first thing I would really want to stress. And this is, again, this is a personal workflow for me, I find, because also when I start going into cloth, okay, and darn it, because we're in the topic, let's talk about it, right? So this one, I'm pretty much done. So I did put some thickness on here for him, for this particular one. So let's go ahead and apply this. And how I like to start looking at cloth for me is pretty much, for the most part, 4 brushes is all I personally use, which number 1 is the clay buildup, number 2 is the DM standard, the smoothing brush, okay, is another one, and then I'll use inflate. That's really it. And then obviously if you throw the move brush on there, you're going to do some moving stuff. So if you really want to say it, there's like 5 brushes I use, but the 2 that I use the most is clay buildup and Damien standard. And I look at, for me, cloth in, again, like I was talking about sculpting, the first 20%. So I'm done the first 20% of my sculpting now. So if we take that back to the transition thing where I was trying to relate it to Dynamesh, okay, I'm now done Dynameshing. I figured out the character. I've got the silhouette. I've got the majority portions of like the character I'm working at. Okay. now I would come out of Dynamesh or ZRemesh something and then start adding subdivision levels. So that's kind of the point I'm at now. I've got my base mesh done. I'm adding subdivision levels. I want to start blocking in cloth. So for me, blocking in cloth, and here, let me see if I can, let me find a very quick, actually, since I wasn't planning on going on this topic, but you guys that know me, I'm Captain Tangent sometimes. Let's look at this. Let's try long sleeve. Hold on. Shirt, because they should have some good folds in there. I'm going down a rabbit hole. I love it. I love tangents. I love Captain Tangent here. All right, let's see. Hold on. Let me find an image that's a little bit got a little bit more to it. Collared shirts. I'm looking for a particular image online real quick to get my what I'm trying to stress here for me and for clothing and what I would do for cloth. Wow, Google's failing me. I'm finding shirts, but not kind of what I'm like. I guess we'll just have to go with. Let's just go with this one. Okay, so let me drag this over so everyone can see. Okay, so if you look at this shirt, right, there's really not that many folds, and I'm planning not to put too many folds in the leather for my guy because he's not going to be really drastic change like it's his pose where he's like flying through the air. It's more of like that heroic, you know, just a little shoulders up, head up, and a little bit of a turn. So that's not going to create a lot of folds, and you gotta think of that sense. So for me, I look at where is tension points, and tension points are where there's actually stitching happening. Number one, you're going to have some tension points there, okay, because they are doing the opposite we are. They are taking a cloth and laying it out flat on a table, cutting it out, and then they're sewing it together. So in essence, they're going from UV sets to 3D. We're the opposite, right? We're in 3D mode already, and now we just got to clothe it. So I also break down my cloth that way. I think about how things are made in real world, and I like to break it down and make it that. So in this case, this right here for me would be a polygroup. That right there, this would be a polygroup. This would be a polygroup. This, and so forth and so on, right? And then that helps me start thinking about the tension. And obviously, if I pull up an arm, right, my clothing lines are changing and how it's folding is changing. And so then for me, I look at this in 3 stages. I look for huge major folds. And when you got something that's extremely wrinkled, or there's a lot of cloth going on, right? I'm looking for like the big ones. Like this is a big fold. That's a big fold. This is clearly a big fold, right? These in here are bigger folds. So I call those like my main folds. And to me, those are the most important ones to block out first. So I block those out. And then that makes me, especially when I'm looking at my reference, those are the only folds I'm really looking to block out really quick. It's just some major, major folds. So for me, in this example, in this image, my first sculpting would be this stroke right here, this stroke in here, and then these in here, and maybe those right there. That's it. Then I go to my second phase of folds, which to me is your secondary folds, which are these. So I like to call these like a cause and effect fold, because of maybe you're doing something like this where I'm bending the arm big. That's automatically, you're creating a major fold right here in my arm. Okay, I don't know, let me see if you can see that. But then there's all these other folds in this area that are happening because of that bend, right? So to me, those are the cause and effect. So when I start bending things or these shoulders go back a little bit, you're going to start creating a tension point right here, right, in our shoulder. So that's why I start to maybe get some little bit of some folding there. So that is a secondary fold. And then the last one is, I like to call it tertiary folds. And this is, again, this is just me, all right? And that's the little folds now. So now I'm going in and finding like the little ones like that, or right there, that little one, or right here in that pocket, there's a little one right there, okay? So because this is my mindset for clothing, this is part of the reason why I set up my cloth the way I do. So if you're looking at this, and we think about this again in sculpture, I'm going to say, let's go something kind of major. Let's say there's a tension point up here, right? I'm going to maybe say, well, there's some big folds. You know what? Let's take symmetry off because that's not distracting. And by the way, I do the folds for my cloth after I pose too. All right. because they're asymmetrical. So very rarely do I sculpt folds and clothing symmetrical. So I don't even put my folds on my clothing until he's posed anyways. So just another thing for you. So again, back to this, okay? I start doing things like, you know, this is going to be some kind of major fold through here. That's happening, right? And then again, smoothing, I love to smooth this out, right? And then just start grading, and I see now a big fold starting to happen through here. And does that fold start coming through and coming like this, right? Does it start doing that little, I like to say an L hook happening through that you'll see in cloth, and then I push it back, right? And I really use that smoothing capability to help push things back and soften that fold for me, okay? That's important for me as a, you know, as a sculptor, okay? And then again, polygrouping, 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 okay? So something I want to point out right here is this guy that I'm working on, right? I put these little buttons that obviously he's going to have in the locations where I want them. And for me, I'm personally doing that because I want to see, is the scale of this whole front part correct? And honestly, when I first made it, it wasn't right. So by me saying, well, how many buttons are supposed to be down the side here? I found the correct also proportions, but again, I'm also building off something that already exists. And this also helps me land proportions right off the bat correct. I'm taking an existing body mesh and then just building right off that. I can't stress how useful that is. This is how I started him. I just grabbed the mesh that's inside of ZBrush and I started building off it, right? So back to this. So using polygrouping is going to be a huge benefit for us, okay? So there's 3 things we could do about this. So if you look, this sculpting is also happening on that button. That's a rigid body and it shouldn't happen. You shouldn't have that on this. So of course I could split these off and make them their own subtool, but let's take the approach of I can't do that. I need to keep them the same subtool, right? So what I mean by that is I sculpt here, see it's sculpting that because they're the same exact subtool, okay? So here's the one thing you can do, and this is why it could be beneficial for you. It's also going to help with making some tensions where those buttons, and I'm going to show you guys the technique that I'm going to use to put the little hole that's in the shirt as well, okay? So here we'll put solo on so people know that we're working on a Rocketeer. What you can do, here's a couple things, okay? Okay, so, and I agree with the person. It depends on how much procedural sculpting you want to do. I mean, procedural cloth depends how many sculpting you want to do. So, and there's definitely a marriage between it, for sure. Me, I'm just trying to mess around. Hopefully I make something cool that everybody likes. So, I'm going to go to the brush palette, okay? And in this auto masking, I'm just going to turn this slider all the way up. So now I've got backface mask on for this brush, okay? And then mask by polygroups, that is a global setting. This is not a global setting, the backface masking. That is only for the brush I have selected, but this slider is global. So what I'm going to do now is as I start sculpting, you can see it doesn't touch the button anymore, right? So this creates a very cool workflow for me to start, you know, working on things like this, and I can start landing points. Right, so I need some more geometry here, right, so that I can start working on this, right? So I am now working in a stage where I'm on level 6, but I can still walk down, right, walk up. I can make big changes, right? And then this right now, because I've turned on, okay, what we have. So if I start doing things like this, if I start, right, on this, so that's messing up my cloth. So if I start doing things where I want to come into here and like accent that a little bit more, go a little bit bigger with it maybe, a little bit more, do this, and then maybe something like this, and then I want a nice peak, so I'm holding the Alt key in there to create a peak here, right, and then say, oh, let me continue that kind of peak in the cloth there and then smooth it back some. Okay, so what's happening is I've got a polygrouping. So this is where I mean where I started this whole stream. That's where I mean I'm setting up myself. Down the line, I know sculpturally, I'm going to do techniques like this. So that's why I stayed very low polygon, right? So if we look back at the lowest version, you see how low polygon this is? It makes it easier for me to set up polygrouping and makes it easier for me to do creasing edges. And because I know as I start to sculpt on this piece, I want to take advantage of certain features within inside of ZBrush, and this is one I'm taking advantage of. I'm taking advantage of the capability that I can sculpt on one polygroup, right? And even go through this button and it doesn't touch it, right? So that is very beneficial for me. Super beneficial, right? And then you can see I'm smoothing it out, and we're going to go and see that's not smoothing the button because ZBrush is already interacting with this polygroup, so it doesn't touch this. So really with one slider, I've kind of created a system for me. When I have multiple subtools here, right, I can do what I want with it, right? And even when I go over here, see, it doesn't smooth any of the edging, right? It's only smoothing out that polygroup and nothing else. So then, of course, if I think about it in this sense, if I switch to, say, something like inflate, and I do something like that, right, it's actually only happening on that outer polygroup. That's an extreme case. So if we turn on polygrouping, you can see there's a polygroup right here. So if I do this, see, it's really only happening on there. And see, that's going to give me that better fold that I'm going to be looking for when I go to actually sculpt this and put that fold in. And because it's polygrouped off, I'm getting a nice little seam cut right there. And I'm also going to use that polygroup to put stitching down the line. So you can see I'm setting myself up for things down the road that I'm going to do to this cloth. So that's why I kind of look at cloth as kind of like a 1, 2, 3 stepping stage in general, and then the wrinkles themselves is like a 1, 2, 3 stepping stage for me. So hopefully that helps you guys start thinking about this. So let's look at something that's also a little bit simpler. Oh, actually, before we go there, obviously, guys, if I turn this off, okay, completely, you can, of course, use masking. So obviously, the easiest thing to do is switch to your gizmo, which I'm just hitting the W key. It doesn't really matter. Hold down Control, and then just tap on that polygroup. And you can see everything else automatically gets masked for me. And now I'm just sculpting only on that polygroup. Sorry, needed to grab a drink real quick, right? And then, of course, we can blur that if we want. So I'm holding the control, and I'm tapping it. Tappa. Okay? And then there you go, right? Well, I want to mess that back up. Oh, I unmasked that accidentally. Okay? And then now I can start, see, doing the same thing. And then see, when I get here and then start smoothing it out, see, I'm building up. I can use this to start building up the opposite side of the ridge and really start selling that this is leather that's meeting, and there's going to be a stitch there. So there's 2 leather pieces that are being together, and then the stitch does that, right? Creates that little portion that I'm trying to get through here. Okay? So that's just another way to go about it. Okay? So I find this all very, very useful for myself and different approaches. So going back to doing something simple like this guy right here, there's already a brush that we have that can do that, right? So again, I don't put myself into subdivision surfaces until I have everything else. So I would actually go backwards to this guy and go back to where we started this stream with him at. So let me go through my undos here. Okay, and back to this. So this is why I love dynamic subdiv. So dynamic subdiv was not made just for hard surface. This is a prime example of how I like to use it with organic. So I'm blocking out my stuff organically and looking at this, but then I also want to start drawing on top of this, but I want to use brushes that you can't use with subdivision surfaces. Okay? So I want to do a little something where you guys doing something as simple as that. There's already a brush here that exists that you guys can grab. So it's curve, strap, snap. Okay? And so now this, right, is just a brush, okay, that I can say, okay, I want the shoulder strap to him to come across here, right? It's just saying, do you want it? And then coming here. Right, and then I can edit this and move it around, and I'm already seeing it smooth because right now what I'm drawing on that surface is already smooth. Okay, and for me, right? Looking at that, I might want to start also creasing some elements here, okay? Or if I want to make the strap a little bit bigger, right? I just go make a bigger draw size, and then I tap on the curve, and now I got bigger straps. So how big of straps I want? So if we turn everything on, I'm doing this because then I can really see it working with all my other subtools. And if you notice my head, I've always doing this. I don't know why. All right, it's like old school when I was a kid playing the Nintendo. That's right. That's how old I am. Go 80s. All right. You would move your hand. I don't think you do that as much anymore with the obviously their newer controls. They're more aeronomical, and that they're more in your hand. And then all these now there's like 15 buttons and not 2. So, but me, I'd be like, jump, Mario, jump, jump, and then you would stand, jump. Right? It's funny. So, anyways. I'm doing this on purpose so that then I can turn all my subtools on and see how things are relating. And I'm not committed to the piece yet, and I'm not married, so I can start adjusting and playing with things. In the stroke palette, for something like this, I really prefer to turn on lock start and lock end because I want that strap to stay at the beginning point and the end point. And then now when I pull on it, you can see it's a quick way for me to even fix it, right? So here, if we turn everything else off, so we're only looking at this jacket portion now. So you can see as I pull it, because this brush is snapping to the surface, you can see that's laying perfectly on the surface. And it's just following the surface, and that's exactly what I want, right? And then for me, I want to put some creasing into this, okay? So then this is the point where I go, all right, I'm happy with the thickness of that strap. I like the way it looks. What I don't like is how it's smoothing. For me, it's smoothing a little too much. I want that to be kind of like thicker leather, like almost like a belt, right? So in that case, they'll take multiple pieces of leather, if not 2 pieces of really rawhide leather, and then they stitch them together, right? So that creates a thicker belt, right? Or they'll have some kind of thick thing, and then they'll glue the leather on depending on the manufacturing of the belts that we have, right? So how you, oh wait, so here's the question. How do I view everything again? So what I'm doing is, this is my selected subtool, is my jacket. And you can see all the eyeballs are off. So if you hold the shift key and you click on the eyeball, it turns all my subtools on. Okay, and if I hold the shift key and because of the selected mesh, and I click the eyeball, all the other subtools turn off. So it's different than solo mode. Okay, in the sense I'm actually turning all my subtools off. Where there's solo mode, you can also do this. But now solo is just saying, only show me this selected subtool, regardless of what eyeballs are on and off. So there's 2 ways you can go about doing that. Oh yes, the Atari. You know how many times I pulled, I think, the controller out of my Atari in 1984 playing Pitfall and Cubert? I can't even count. And I can't tell you how many times I've been grounded for Super Mario Brothers. Okay? At least twice right now that I can think of off the top of my head. Okay, so looking at this, right, I'm happy with where the straps are sitting on him. I'm happy with the width. I'm just not happy with what's happening here. So now that I'm happy with it, let's see if I can say happy one more time. It's like Super Troopers. Meow. Right meow. Right meow. Okay, so I want to split this off now. So all I got to do, because this is using an insert mesh brush, I can go to split, and I can just say either one, really honestly, almost any of these 4 down here, okay? Except for split the parts, I wouldn't do that. If I hit split the parts, it'll create this is one subtool and this is one subtool. I want them to stay together. So I'm just going to say split on mask points, right? And now I have this. So I'm going to do not solo mode, but I'm going to turn everything off because now I want to turn this back on. Okay, and I don't need any more of those curves. So in curve functions, I can delete the curves and they're gone. Now I have this, and I want to do some. I'm looking at this now in a dynamic subdiv because I drew on a surface that was dynamic subdiv, and now I'm going and doing that. Okay, so what I want to do is in my creasing, I've already got the crease level that I want, because I put that crease level on the jacket, the main jacket already. So all these settings are transferring over to this. Perfect. And what I want to do is change my crease tolerance, okay, and throw a crease on on this, right? So I want to come in here and select this one, not the jacket, right? And I want to say in geometry crease, let's crease by tolerance. And then that's more of the strap I'm looking for. Okay, that's what I want. So that's got a nice little soft edge happening. There's some thickness there. And again, guys, I'm trying to 3D print this. So I'm also looking around, thinking and looking at the collision states. And in this case, it would be, I would prefer, even though maybe in the real world, this strap might be coming off the body more, maybe depending on how the Rocketeer is going to be posed. I'm going to restrict that because I want, when I print, I want this strap to be part of the jacket. So I want that thickness, and I don't want to sit with dealing with all supports. So that's going to be one of the top. Oh my God, HD Geometry is killing it right now. So the prep for 3D printing would be some of those discussions I would have. But it looks like you guys really want to know about HD Geometry for the next time we meet. That's cool. I like that. All right, there's a lot of interest in that. Cool. So looking at this, I want to now continue playing with this strap, okay? So let's just look at only the strap now. Again, I've got really low polygons, benefit me. And what I want to do now is I want to put ridging on either side. In essence, that's the part where the stitching is going to go, which would put the two pieces of that leather together, or 3 or 4 pieces, or whatever it is for, like, you know, if you look, again, look at a belt. Okay? So what I want to do is say, let's switch to Z Modeler. Okay? And I'm going to go over an edge, and I'm going to say insert multiple edge loops, and then I'm going to go beep, 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 beep. Sound effects so crucial. There, that's good enough. Okay, and all I'm looking at is this ridge and this ridge. So what I don't need are these. So I'm just going to delete these really quick because I don't actually need them. Right? I just care about that ridge and that ridge right there. That's all I care about. Nothing else, right? And it looks like I have, sorry, I have it, this happening down here. So this is what I would fix in this brush. So you notice those ridge wasn't going all the way through, correct? It's because there's triangles. Okay, this is an easy fix, people, right? This is just going delete, saying flat island, and hitting delete. There you go. Delete. That's gone. And now I just close it back up. So go back to my edge, and I say bridge, and I'm just bridging edges. So I click on the one edge, and I click on the other edge. There, that's done. And then I actually want it to have different polygroups, so that works out. And it's not really going to matter, right? Because the minute I come back to this inserting, going boop, 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 but now you can see it's happening on the backside, right? And so that just is keeping consistent geometry for me, which really doesn't matter because, again, I'm doing a 3D print. And you guys are never going to see this part, right? So it doesn't really matter that much. So that is why that's happening. And that, again, that's because this brush actually has, okay, the endpoints having an X at it, right? So I can make my own and not have that, but why not just use the one that's in ZBrush already, right? And then let's go, and I'm going to say, let's crease this, and let's crease it by polygrouping. So that's going to crease that and keep that. And now all I have to do is, this is the same polygroup. Hold down spacebar, switch to my Q mesh, say polygroup all, start pushing it in, and switch my polygroup. And then there's my little ridge, right? There you go. I've got it. Boom, just like that. All right. Okay, so let's take this now and say, how do I want to start putting stitching on there? Okay, because if we go down the line, the piece that I've started to put some leather look is this to it. So I'm just in this beginning process, but I've also laid stitches already so that as I start building the tension, it should make sense based upon the stitching too, right? So I don't want to just throw tension in the leather here, right, without looking also at the stitching. So the stitching is pretty easy the way I did this. So you see right here, I need to fix that right in there. So this is why I would lay the stitching down. So this is all I do to do that portion. Let's go to the straps, the new straps that I made, which is this, and we'll turn off. We don't need to see those stitches. And this is how easy you can do this, right? So I'm going to drop down dynamic. I'm just going to turn dynamic subdiv off. Excuse me. Oh, my throat's killing me today. So I'm just turning dynamic. D as in David or dynamite, right? Turns it on. Shift D turns it off. Now you guys are awake. Look up here. For those that know me, let's wake up. Hey, Logalo, yeah, I will absolutely explain frame mesh for you some more, for sure. I'm actually going to dive right in it right now, so it's going to help you. Okay, so I've got polygrouping here, and when I Q-meshed this in, I made new polygroups on purpose because, again, I'm setting myself up that I know I'm going to want to use those. It's going to happen. I'm going to want to do that, all right? So I just want to grab these polygroups, these new ones. These are the ones I made, right? And I'm going to shrink it once. And what that's doing is giving me now just this internal new piece that I made. So let's do that again, okay? So I'm just going to click on a polygroup. And because these two green polygroups here are sharing the same vertex point, look at me, look at me, look up here. I like it. The look at me is part of the movie for those that don't know. That was thrown in the chat there. Three Amigos. Go watch it. 80s classics. Okay? Holding down Control-Shift, tapping on the two polygroups gives me only those two polygroups. I'm holding down Control-Shift and hitting the S key as in shrink. That's the same thing as me going to visibility here and hitting that shrink button right there. And there you go. There's your shortcuts. You have shrink and grow. Okay? So that's how I'm shrinking it. So now that I have that, okay, I want to add an edge loop, and I want to put the edge loop dead center of here because that's where I want the stitching to go. Okay? So I'm going to go over an edge. I've got multiple edge selected. That's good. But what I'm going to do, instead of doing an interactive resolution, I'm going to go to specific or specified resolution, right? I'm going to put it to 1, and all I'm going to do is tap, right? And then tap. And that's giving me a new edge directly in the center of that mesh. So perfect. That's exactly what I want. So if we bring everything back, right, I've got an edge in there. So what I want to do is start using this, okay? So if I shrink this now, okay, to your frame mesh, if you look at what I have right now, all right, I've got exposed geometry that there's a part of it hidden and a part of it showing. So really think about this as, think of it almost as, I guess, a book or pieces of paper, right? So when you flip, obviously open a book, there's 2 pages, right? But when you're reading, you're only reading 1 page until you get to the other page, okay? So what I'm doing right now visually with inside of ZBrush is almost like a book. I am now telling ZBrush to only show me this part of the mesh, the straps, that inner portion of the straps, and on the other page, hide this other strap over here, right? And then at any time, I can turn the page, right? So then, or do a flip like this, okay? And so that's, in essence, the easiest way I can explain selection to you is think about almost like turning a page or doing a page flip there, okay? So what I want to do is use this with a particular brush, again, that already ships with ZBrush. So I'm trying to show some brushes that ship. So you too at home can do this. Now I feel like Bob Ross. There, you can do this. Which, oh, flash of the brush. Like, yeah, Bob, every time I did that, it doesn't look like a mountain. It just looks like a blob of paint. But anyways, I digress. So in Lightbox, I'm going to click on Brush. And right here, when we came out with IMM brushes, which was like, I don't even know now, 6 years ago? It's so long ago now. 5 years ago. That the beta testers made some pretty cool brushes. And one of my go-to stitch brushes lives right here. So there's 2 right here. Look, there's a rope, there's barbed wire, there's a belt, there's a bike chain. You know, there's tons of cool stuff here. This one right here, I really like a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to load this. I'm going to double click and now we've got it loaded. Okay, this is being put along a curve. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take advantage of that. All right, let's go with a little bit bigger draw size. and I'm going to go, this is what frame mesh will do for you. So I'm going to dock this because we're going to sit in this for a moment. Okay, so by default, you guys are going to have this in frame mesh. Okay, so what these items over here are telling ZBrush, hey, when you frame a piece of geometry and when you're looking at it, ZBrush, oh man, ABBK happened. What do I want you, ZBrush, to look at? This is saying look at a border, which right now we have a border on either side, right? Look at polygroups and look at crease edges. So I have all three items here. Okay, I've got border edges, so I've got borders, in essence, edges that are exposed, they're open borders, and I got creasing here. So if I click this, you can see I'm going to get a curve there, and a curve in there, right? So I'm getting three curves, right? So when I look at this, right, and I look at smooth again, and I go to tap on this now, see I'm getting the stitches, right, in three locations. Right, and then changing the size is me changing my draw size and then just tapping again, and then see my stitches are changing. So I get the smaller and smaller in draw size I go, obviously the smaller in stitching I go. So if this is what we're looking for, right, then this is what you start to get. Okay, so if I wanted triple stitching, maybe that's what I would do. Okay, that's not what I want for this guy. That's not what I'm looking for, actually. Okay. So if I don't want it to go into the creasing, I turn this button off, hit frame mesh, and you can see now we don't get a curve in the middle now. Okay. What I want to do is I want to use polygrouping. Okay. That's what I want to use. So what I'm going to do is, for me, I'm going to say, you know what? Let's make this its own polygroup there, and let's do the same thing there. That's the same polygroup, let's say. And let's do the same thing on the back side, right? And then that's a polygroup, and then that's a polygroup, okay? And then now I'm going to click, see? And you can get just the blue if I wanted to, right? So now what becomes important to me is just the green. So now, see, I'm not getting that part right there. That's why I made those polygroups. I did that on purpose, okay? And then I'm going to say, you know what? You know what's important to me is just only this front portion. So I'm going to, and I don't really necessarily have to do this, but I'm just trying to show you guys features here as well. So in ZMall, I'm going to switch to polygroup, and I'm going to say island. And I'm going to click, right? And you can see they all get the same polygroup island, right? Because this is looking at islands now, right? And as I keep clicking and tapping the Alt key, it keeps switching, right? So what I want to do is I want to tell ZBrush, you know what? I want to go to polygrouping, and I want you to auto group instead. Okay? And you can see what's happening here is every one of those strips that are not connected get their own polygroup. So I can hide these other portions now quite easily, and I can do a Control W now, and now that front piece, right, has its own. So some of you might be going, well, that's a lot of steps, right? But again, guys, this is the very beginning. I'm thinking, again, setting myself up down the road for other features that I'm going to use on this, and I'm going to use sculpting features that are going to use with polygrouping and all that, right? So for me, if it's an extra 2 minutes, 3 minutes to set this polygrouping up right, that's going to save me probably, when I get down the road of sculpting, probably more like 30 minutes to an hour or longer. I'm totally cool with it. That, to me, is worth my time, okay? So the reason why keyboard, I don't want to just draw it, I'm not drawing it on the surface, is because this is pretty easy, right? But you might have some kind of surface like I have for the jacket. You might start having, when I start putting in the wrinkles, you're going to have surface that kind of folds and does this. So this is a great way that I'm showing to, with one click, you can make the stitching happen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show only this, okay? And I'm going to tell ZBrush now, you know what? Let's even go one step further with polygrouping, and let's polyloop that, right? And now I have this. And now watch, if I turn off border as well and only use polygroup, you can see what I get, where that frame is going. So let's go back to my stitchy brush here, frame. what it's only thing that's going to get that is that curve right there. And for me, this is the design I'm looking for. So when I tap, there's my stitching. Right? That's what I'm looking for this. And see, there you go. And then when I smooth it, right, I can see it's smooth, and it's also smoothing the stitch. And then that's what I want. I want a single stitch happening in that loop. Okay? So keyboard, this would be why I would do it. No, it doesn't need to follow an edge loop. So it's not that it's following an edge loop. You can make this follow anything, right? So if I even, the point of this is, you know, if you get something like this, right, and think about, we're just doing stitching, okay? So here you go. Here's an example of way maybe you would want to do something like this. Let's just say we throw this into shadow box, right? And then let's say, okay, I don't want that shape actually. I want something that's a little different. Maybe I want something that is this, comes across like that, down like that. Perfect, like this. Let's just say I'm looking for a shape kind of like this. Right? And then I can control my thickness if I want. I don't really care, honestly. Right? This is good enough for me, and it come out of shadow box, and I've got this shape now. Okay? So I got this. So if you think about even grabbing something like let's say I am, where are you? Curve. And then I go here and along and I say a tank track, right? So if you think about this, right? Are you really going to want to do this? And then, you know, have to keep drawing around, and then you're not straight, right? So the framing gives me capability to do things like this, right? So I can frame around the mesh and see it's going right around with one stroke. So this is me just holding the shift key, and when I do this with the curve, it's actually looking at this frame meshing. Okay, so to that point, all right, if I was even to do now a simple little slice here, whoop, not clip, slice curve, and I like the questions, keep them coming, right? Do something like this. I've got different polygrouping, right? If with this particular brush, I can start drawing and then just hold the shift key, right? And it'll start going around that polygroup, right? But I can just as easy come here, whoops, come over here and just hit frame mesh by polygroup. And see, there's an internal one, and then there's an out one. And if I don't want that internal one, right? Right, because the minute I click on this, I'm going to get it in both locations, right? So if I want to delete this, here's a quick trick. I'll switch to a different brush, like say ZRemesher guides, and you can delete. So I'm just holding Alt and then deleting it. Then I'm going to go back to that IMM curve, and then see now I only get the the tank tracks there. So this is where you can start using it. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. Looks like that helped you some more. Okay, so going back, this is pretty much all I'm doing, right? And I'm like, all right, I'm happy, and now I move on to my next portion of my next cloth. Okay, so I am going to start sculpting some details into this, right? I want to have some kind of detail happening in here, right? So let's just look at only this for an example. Okay, let's turn off the actual, let's make sure we don't have any more auto masking on. Okay, good. So doing something like this, right? Maybe you want to be able to go the other route. I don't want to lay down a stitch, right? And in this case, again, too, the beauty is I've got polygrouping, right? So I can lay the stitching perfect right along this, right? So if I only show this piece, I can put stitching now right along there, and it's going to fall perfect around there, right? But there's going to be times maybe you don't want to do that, or there's going to be times where you kind of want to make a lip in here, okay? So what I've done, okay, is I made a brush for me that's going to give me variations, okay? So here, let me turn them all off, and let me just look at this. So this is a little bit of what a VDM can do, all right? So what I'm going to do is say this is kind of like, if you look at the profile, so this is the part where the leather starts to meet. So instead of doing a stroke and then inflating, I'm going to do it all in one. So this is going to create my little ridge, okay, of inflating, right? And then this is creating a nice little maybe leather, and then down here and it starts to taper in into the leather. So what I've done is I made variations. So I have both sides. And then I started saying, well, what if I already put the stitch in, right? So I got different variations of a stitch. And then this is probably the best one for a stitch. Okay, so what I want to show is first the brush, okay? Then I wanted to give you guys kind of the idea and the concept here of how I got to this point. So all I did was made planes, and I've just sculpted different variations of this, okay? So I'm just going through and having different spots. So what I'm going to tell ZBrush to do is this. I'm going to select this brush that ships with ZBrush, which is the Chisel 3D. And what I want to do is actually change it. I want to get rid of all these noses and faces, and I want to put what I made on this brush. Man, it looks like HD Geometry is way in the lead for voting. Nothing's even close. 56% of the vote. Gizmo's getting no love. He's only got 3 votes. Okay, so I am setting up a tool for myself specifically for the Rocketeer. And this particular tool is going to have a lot of leather elements to it. The ridging and the little parts where I'm going to put the buttons and stuff like that, okay? So I'm starting to make this brush now, and I'm just making various different variations of that, okay? That's all I'm trying to do here. So what I want to do is tell ZBrush, take all these subtools and apply it to the brush. Okay, so I'm just going to go to Brush, all right? I'll close this. I'm going to go to Create, and I'm just going to hit this button right here. Create Multiple Alpha. And then ZBrush is going to grab each one of those subtools, which equals 5 million. So I'm making a pretty dense brush here, okay? And it's going to put them along the top for me, right? So now these are replacing, if you notice, right? These have replaced the brush. So in essence, I've now got that brush ready to go. So if I switch to a plane, okay, and I'll make this a poly mesh, and let's just divide this up so we can see sculpturally what we're getting, okay? So now what I'm going to get is this, right? And then I can grab this one and I get that. I can grab this one and I get this, right? And there's just variations here of what I made. That's all this is, right? And so this is now affecting the surface and pulling on the surface, okay? And what I wanted to do is, instead of doing a drag rec, I wanted to do, like, say something like a dots and start playing with this capability, right? So this is now dropping this so many times. And you can see where I'm starting to go with this now. I'm starting to create that little quick ridge that I want in the leather where they meet, okay? So I just need to tweak this a little bit to what I want. So in the stroke palette, I'm going to turn on Lazy Mouse, okay? And that's going to make the brush now act a lot better for me, okay? Because now there's a stepping involved, right? So I've got a nice step that's happening through here. Okay, so this stepping right here is what's going on. So if I turn this up, let's turn it up to 1. You're going to see, this almost looks like zippers now. Right? So I could use it for zippers because, you know, if we're not letting the user see, if I do this, that totally is going to look like a zipper, even though that's not where I was going. Okay? But because I can play with that stepping inside the Lazy Mouse, right, I can do this. So 0.25 was looking pretty good, actually. I was getting pretty nice. You know, now I just take the time to say, well, maybe 0.4. Yeah, that's actually way better. Yeah, I really like that. And then there you go. I found that setting that works really well, right? And then now, because this is also on Lazy Mouse, okay? So again, I'm changing that stepping. So what that's controlling is this piece, how often does it drop, right? I love that I'm doing this down here and I'm looking at my hands move, and you guys can't see that at all. Right here. There you go. There. Oh, righty then. Okay, so I'm just trying to say this, it's steps one, right? It drops it, and then drops another, and then drops another. So think about the old Play-Doh world. We had a cylinder, and you rolled it on the Play-Doh, and you would get the shapes, right? Think about it in that sense. And then I want to control that gap between the drops. Okay? So I'm dropping that stepping down so I can get a stroke like this, right? And then because I have lazy mouse, I can take advantage of this, where I can draw something straight. And not only that, what I'm going to do is even throw a morph target on this, right? So if I say, hey, I want to go from here to here with it, okay? And then now maybe I want to go across, right? From here to here, right? You can start getting that. And it's going to start really looking like that ridge is building up. And then now I can go through and play with this and maybe fix parts that I want. Don't want this to happen right in there. So I could go fix that if I want to. Okay? So this creates a very nice, unique workflow for me. Okay? And the reason why I'm storing a morph target is I can say, I don't like this, right? I can morph out portions of it if I want. But it also will help me smooth transition here if I want to kind of slower transition, start maybe doing something more like that, right? And I can do that, and then I can just say, nah, I hate that, switch it back, okay? So let's put that now in context, okay, to something like this, right? So this, the benefit now of me grabbing that brush I just made, okay, is this brush can work on subdivision surfaces. Okay, so if I grab, say, this first one, right, I can come in here and start laying that out and start getting that ridge. And maybe I want to go smaller, right, and then start laying out the ridge through there, right? And then, of course, if I start laying a ridge through there, I don't have enough geometry right now. Right, but you can see the goal I'm trying to get with this, okay, and where I'm trying to go with this. And then if I have one with stitching, right, I'm immediately going to get the stitching now, right? So maybe I want to use that one along here and get some stitching, see? And then now I've already got that stitching happening right off the bat. And see, when I pull away, right, that totally looks natural to me, right? So that is the approach. So I'm trying to make brushes. And so what I did, okay, this was my workflow, how I got to this little ridge thing. My handy dandy, and I love it, my Z modeler. So here's the actual piece that I made. Okay, you can see it's very slow. It's nothing major, nothing crazy here. This is just various pieces of geometry, okay, that I have going here. This was literally, this piece right here is made from a cylinder. That's it. Okay? So what I did, right, is I went to this and said, what am I going to want here? So I'm going to go here to my cylinder. Sound effects, so important! Okay? I don't know why. Just roll with me. For those that have tuned into my stream, they know I'm crazy and nuts, so just enjoy. Okay, so I want this to change my initialize, so I'm going to go down here. I'm also going to say align it along the Z, and I definitely don't want this many spans, so maybe 8. No, maybe 6. Yes! Because what I am visually looking for here is I want to build off this right here, right? So if you look at my original, right, you can see what I've done here, right? I'm trying to get a flat point here, right? That's all I'm trying to do right there, okay? And then that way I can build off that, because I know what's going to happen here is this is going to all end up rounding out, and then this is not, okay? So I've got this happening now. And let me turn off the other floors, okay? And I'm going to say, you know what, that's good enough. I like it. So then I just make it a poly mesh, okay? And then I say, all right, let's go ahead and switch to ZModeler. Right, and then I'm going to say I just want to pull a QMesh, one single polygon off this. Hi, Pancho 3D. So then all I'm doing is just pulling that, right? And I want that to have kind of a tapering to the ridge. So I'm just going to quickly unmask and then just use my gizmo to give it that taper, right? I want to maybe have another here because then I also want to now insert something in here, right? Because then maybe I want to come off this, right? So maybe I want to do something like that and maybe even something like this, right? So now I have that happening. Okay. And then now for me, I'm going to use the depth as a thing. So I want this depth, you know, looking at it from this view looks fine. Okay. But really, there's a depth here. So what I'm going to do is I want to make this completely all flat. That's what's important to me, okay? So I'm going to switch to the clip curve, and I'm just going to draw right across there and say, boom. That's what I want. And notice I'm not in perspective mode, okay? And for this entire model, I'm not going to be in perspective mode, and the reason being is I'm planning to 3D print him. So when I'm 3D printing something, I'm never in perspective mode inside of ZBrush because then there's a camera distortion, and that's not what's going to happen. Boom! And I like someone threw in that boom. That woke everyone up right there. Okay, so now I have this. Okay, I'm just going to do simple polygrouping. Polygroup all. Nothing fancy here. Then I'm going to go, you know what? Let's go polygrouping, and let's say flat island. So I can say put a polygroup there, put a polygroup, and make that one different. Put a polygroup there. So I'm just tapping the Alt key to change out the polygrouping. So now I have things like that, and I'm going to say I also want a different polygroup there, and I want a different polygroup there. Okay? And then now I just tell the handy dandy, the old reliable crease PG, right? And what that does is wherever I made a polygroup, I'm getting a crease. And that's what's important to me. Because then when I smooth, this is what that looks like. Right? And then now I decide, do I maybe now also want to crease this edge? Right? And then I can look at that and say, is that what I want? No, maybe if I only crease only that edge right there. Yeah, I actually like that. I want that kind of ridge right there when I draw out. That's what I'm looking for. Right? So what I'm going to tell ZBrush is let's soften this a little bit. So I'm going to change my crease level again. Let's try 3. And then up it to 4, and you can see what we start to get. Right? We soften the edging just a bit. Just a bit. Okay? And now I'm like, all right, that's good. I'm pretty happy with that. I don't like what's happening there, so that's an easy fix if I want to. There's several ways. I can go in setting, okay, if I want, and I'll say region, flat island, and then I can just inset that, right? And then it's insetting along that island. But really, the best way to do this, right, would be for me to just go like this. Just over an edge, insert multiple edge loops, and do an interactive, and then there. That's giving me now the edge that's good enough. Because I'm building a piece that I'm going to grab from the top, right? You're never going to see this. You're only going to see this, right? And I want this edge actually to be creased. Now looking at this, I want that because I want that little lip to happen in the brush. That little part of that leather where they're meeting, and it flaps out. Okay, so I can continue also saying, you know what? Let's make even this crease a little more predominant. So I'm adding an edge loop. So it's pushing that way and making it be a little more like that. All right, so that's my parts of my leather parts where there's a leather and then there's a tubing in there maybe, or like a little bend happening. So that's what I'm getting there. So the next thing I wanted to do was, well, I wanted to make a version with a stitch. Okay, so that is really easy to do as well. I'm actually going to grab the exact same cylinder here, right, that we were playing with, and I'm going to say, let's give this some more, maybe let's give this 12 so it's a little bit more smooth. Okay, and then I'm going to say All right, let's build now the little stitch. So I'm going to say it only needs to be maybe about like that. That's probably good enough for me. Okay. Then I'm going to like, all right, that looks good. Let's switch to our handy dandy Z modeler, which we are on. I'm going to turn off the floor grid. And then I'm going to hover over a face. I'm going to say Q mesh that puppy. Poly loop. Right? And then I'm just going to pull that out. And I'm going to change my poly grouping. Perfect. There. Yep, that's what I want. I love it. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to change that. Yeah. Right? And then in here, I'm going to add an insert edge. And then I'm going to pull up like that. And then now I've got a little bevel happening there with some tapering going on. It's exactly what I want. I'm going to control my creasing. Say I want some there. I want some there. I want some there. And I want some creasing there. Right? And I'm actually going to add another edge loop. And this is key. And you're going to see why this is key. I'm going to put another edge loop right there. And I'm, in fact, going to also crease that one. You're going to see down the road here why I'm doing that. Okay? And in fact, I want this to be its own poly group. Like that, let's say. So then let's look at what this is looking like smoothed. Right? So that's what I got. You know what? I want this. I don't like this creased. I'm going to uncrease this. I'm not a fan of that. I want it to be maybe creased, maybe something more like that. Right? And then maybe I'll add a little edge. Little something like that, let's just say. And then I'm going to say, I'm pretty happy with that. That's what I'm looking for. Okay? So this is, in essence, is going to help me create the part where it looks like the stitch is going in and like it's bunched up the leather a little bit. Okay? So all I need to do now is add it to this piece. Okay? So to make my life easy, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to turn this into an insert mesh brush. So I'm going to say, this is good. This is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to look at it straight on, because when I draw it out, I want to draw it straight on. Wow, it looks like HD is the winner. 27 votes already for HD geometry. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to say, you know what? Let's grab that. So brush, create insert mesh brush, a new one. I've got a new one there. I'm going to go back to this piece. I'm going to look from the top. We're going to throw that symmetry on, right? And what I want to have is symmetry along the Y. Probably, let's see, let's double check my floor grid, see if I guessed right. Nope, I'm wrong. I want it along the Z. Oh, I failed, right? And now I'm just saying, where does that stitch start? Right there is good for me. That's where I want that stitch to live. Okay, right there. And then do I want this stitch, this part to kind of sit a little bit more in, out? What do I want? Right, so I'm going to put it right about there. That, for me, that looks good. Okay, and then because we have dynamic on, I'm getting to see what this looks like smooth and really what's going to happen there and transpire there. Okay, so what I want to do now is create the stitch. This is how easy we can create the stitch. Okay. I am going to go, all right, this guy has poly grouping, and this is why, this is the key point of why I created this other edge loop inside here and why I re-poly grouped this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on a dynamic so you guys can see what's going to happen here. And I'm going to say, let's go back to Z modeler, and I'm going to say this purple faces, I'm going to say let's delete them by poly group. So that's going to delete any poly group that's the same. So in this case, as you can see, it's only that one, right? And what we have here now is an opening. And I'm going to take advantage of this opening. And I'm going to tell ZBrush, this edge and all this edges around here, and this edge and all those edges around here, let's bridge them, okay? So I'm going to say, you know what, let's hover over an edge, okay? And I'm going to say, all right, bridge, 2 holes. And I'm going to say, well, what kind of stitch do I want? Let's go rounded corners. Just do something different. I always do circle. Okay, and then I'm going to click on that edge. And now ZBrush is telling me click on another edge over here and then drag. And then there's my stitching, right? So I'm gonna, how high do I want the stitch? I don't want it. This is left to right is changing the height. Up and down is changing the spans. I don't need a lot of spans. Say something like that, and there you go. Because now let's look at it smooth. And then there you go. So there you go. I got another version with a stitch, okay? And because I am going to be sculpting on something that has subdivision surfaces, I want to make sure I fix this, okay? And you know what? In fact, I'm going to really add another. I'm going to say back to ZModeler. Let's go back into symmetry mode, and I'm also going to, let's say I want to make this really tight here. Because I know this is going to be repeat, so this edge along the edging will play a significant role. So this is all I'm looking for to do, is something like that. Now that I have this, okay, how do I get it on a flat plane like this so that ZBrush knows to use this as a VDM? Because this is the base I'm getting to, and then now I can start even sculpting on this. I could even start sculpting in here and create even more of an undercut in here. Right? But I'm just creating this as my first start. This is all I'm doing. Watch, this is so simple. Okay? If we want, right, you can grab this. You can even just come here to alpha, and you can say grab dock. See, it's even grabbing everything. It's grabbing all my stuff. It's even grabbing the Rocketeer dude. Okay? Or we can do a switch, right? To grab this awesome thing that we all love to say, MRGBZ grabber. This is going to say, yeah, go ahead and switch. And now I'm just going to say, see, I'm just going to drag this out, and I can grab whatever I want. And I can hold the space bar. And right now I'm just trying to grab that and go boom. That's what I want. I just want that. Okay? So here I'm going to switch to erase, and let's erase all this. So I'm just erasing the 2.5D because I want to keep the Rocketeer 2.5D that I just did, right? Because this is 2.5D, so I want to keep that. All right, let's go now and say let's grab a plane. Let's go ahead and draw that out, right? I'm in edit mode. Okay, this has already got 1,000,000 polygons. And now I just switch to something like, say, the standard brush, right? Or I switch to, I like to use the layer brush and crank the intensity all the way up. Have my full shift and negative, say drag rec, and now grab my alpha, right? And then now I just click and drag. Right? And start putting stuff in there, right? So that's got some of my original morph target in there. Okay, and then drag it out, and then that's what you start to get, right? So all I do is say, all right, this, and hold this, and then say that's what I want right there. Right, and then that's the portion. I'm going to say, not a fan of that, not liking it, okay? So maybe less intensity, right? So this is where you find the brush that you want to use this on. So this is all I did, okay? It wasn't anything crazy fancy. Let's go negative, right? And then I'm going to say, let's up that resolution. Let's up that more, right? And then now that I have this, all I need to do is go back to this brush, and I can add this one now by just going brush, okay? And then I can say, right here, you got all your settings, and from mesh is also right there, and there I just added it. So now every time I draw out, see, now I'm going to get that. Okay, so now this is a new one that I just made. So now I have that, right? And if you go slow, you're going to have that happen. Because this is a very rectangled shape, so all ZBrushes do is it's dropping, 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 right? So it can't keep it smooth really around a fast corner like that. Okay, so I'm using this because if you look at his leather, it's all just pretty much, you know, straight across, straight down, straight up. So this works perfect for me. Okay, so there you go. That's how I made all these pieces. I just started playing with my own piece and started going at it. okay, and figuring out what I want it to look like and how I want it to look, right? And if I want to play more with the height, I add more down here, right? I just switch back to Z modeler, okay? And if I do a Q mesh by flat island, and I say, let's grab that, right? So this is a lot thicker in there, right? So if you look at when we were grabbing the alpha, look at the alpha we have now, okay? If I do this alpha now, RBGZB grabber, right? You can see the alpha looks very different. You can kind of see, in essence, this lipping in here is really a lot more predominant in this alpha than in the original one we grabbed, right? Because you see how it's kind of darker in there, and it's because the depth that we had in here. So let me switch back to eraser. And I'm only erasing like this, guys, because you can hit Control N. I just want to keep this, so that's the only reason why I'm doing this, all right? So I've just made, in essence, this be wide, taller, right? So then it's going to push on the surface even more, right? So that's why it's important to understand that. Do you want an alpha like that, or do you want an alpha more like that? And that's going to give me a very different result, right? And so if I go back to this plane, right, I can even go deformation, and I can say morph to grid, and it puts the plane back to being normal. And then now I can draw out this one and see what this one looks like, right? And then I got this happening, okay? So there is various things that you're going to be able to do with this, right? And you're going to be able to have a lot of fun with this. And I can say, maybe not so strong, right? And then now you have that. And then see, that's thicker. That's going on in there, okay? So with this thought concept and this idea, the other thing that became important to me for him was where the buttons are going in, right? There's some leathering happening through there, right? And I want to start manipulating and playing with that. So I want to create my own little, maybe little version of that, okay? So I'm going to tell ZBrush, all right, let's go about saying, let's switch to symmetry mode. Let's do X and Z, or X and Y, I'm sorry, and then I have this. So what I'm going to do is start laying down just sculpturally now, it's kind of that part where the button has to go through the leather, okay? I'm going to say, it's going to go through there, but it's going to start, it needs to have a bigger opening, maybe something like that, okay? Then I switch to clay buildup. Let's dig this down because that opening should be dug a little bit more down through there. Maybe soften it up a bit, right? And then go, you know, maybe I'll even do this. And just get a little quick, simple ridge in there, right? And let's say, yeah, there, happy little, whoops, happy little trees. And say, let's smooth that out a little bit, smooth that a little bit, right? Let's just say something like this. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is just use this brush to create kind of like a lip. Okay, so you can start from the middle here. You can do whatever you want. Say that's a lip like that. And then I'm going to hit one, and that repeats it. And then now maybe I'll move up a level and soften that ridge just a bit. And there you go. I'm starting to get that nice little lip. Right? So I hope you guys get where I'm trying to go with this. I'm just trying to create a little lip in here where it looks like the button has to go through it. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my Damien standard and maybe make that a little more predominant so you can really tell. Because my goal here, everybody, is I'm trying to convert this into a brush, right? That I can just use over and over again. Right? And I'll soften maybe that down a little bit more. So just, it's not so strong because this is leather, right? So I want to have a soft approach. I want to build up this surface a little bit more, I think. I want a little more volume in here happening, I'd say. Just a bit more. Then we can push that back now. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, there. And then I'm going to go back to the Damien standard, right? and I'm just going to start doing something like this. And I'm just doing this as a quick way to almost make it look like there's even some thread through here. Right? And then this is working out for me really well for what I have, right? Now I have that. You know what? And I want to sell that even more, so I'm going to hit it again along that edge. Right there. So I have something like that happening. Okay? And then now, to boot, let's add something to this. Let's go ahead. I don't know where I got to boot, but go with it. Let's grab our brush here. All right, and then maybe let's grab this one, and let's start sculpting across like this. Right, so I need some more geometry, so I'm going to go up another level. Right, and I'm going to say doing something like that. Right, so I'm going to start from here, I think. I'm going to start way out here. It's remembering my stroke. I'm going to turn that off. I don't want that on right now. And just start doing something like this. But you know what? I kind of don't like that. I prefer actually it coming around like this. Okay, so you can see it's hard for me to get that middle portion, right? Because you're going to think you guys are going to see it like this. That's how you're going to see it, right? So watch this. I'm going to actually turn off X symmetry. Okay, I only have Y on. I'm going to turn on the floor grid, and you see that line right there? That red line? Kind of see that as the center of this plane, because that's what it is. It's the center of the plane. I'm just going to make sure, okay, so actually in this case I need X on, not Y. Okay, oops. I want to make sure I cross over this, because I built this upside down in the wrong way, so no big whoop. So I'm going to start to say, all right, let's start from over here and say, no, that's not what I want. Right? So I want to maybe start from here or this direction, actually. Might help if I didn't go upside down and do something like this. Right? Let's even, maybe we can try starting from there. I don't like that. Let's actually get rid of our lazy radius. Don't like that one. Right? So it's just me figuring out what I like and what I don't like, kind of. Just trying to create a quick little ridge in here. And I'm actually going to smooth it back, because that's what I want. I want something like that. Okay? And because I've crossed this line, I can actually do something like this. I can tell ZBrush, look at this portion of the sculpt, and I want you to do the same thing on the other side. So I go to deformations, and I say smart resim, right? But what I want to resim across is the Y. So I'm going to turn off the X, turn on the Y, and hit smart resim. And bada bing, bada boom. And then that's nice and smooth in there. It's connected, and you're good to go. So now I got this as something to add to this brush now. So now I can go here and say brush, okay? And then I can say from mesh, all right? Boom. That's going to add it to this brush. There it is. Obviously, the name of it is dependent upon the subtool name, right? I'm going to switch to this drag rec, and let's go back to this guy, right? And then now me as an artist, right, I can get stuff like this starting to happen, okay? So what I'm going to do to save myself some geometry, I don't need all these buttons to be divided up into the millions. That's crazy, right? So I'm actually going to go all the way back to the beginning here. Okay, and then now that I have this set up, really that's all that's important to me is this piece. Okay, so I'm going to just select out a portion and then grow all. And I have that, so I can select out a portion by polygroup, Control-Shift-A. I can select out just even a couple faces, Control-Shift-A. And then now I'm ready to split this. Okay, and then now I'm ready to say, let's divide this up and give it its own density. right? So this is already at 1.1 million, but now I'm not dividing up these guys. And so what this gives me is the capability to say, all right, I want to start drawing on this and start doing that. So how big do I really want that, right? So I'm going to go up another subdivision level to give some more density, right? And then so this is what we get. Okay, so I'm going to say, let's use drag rec maybe instead. And that way I can do this, right? Let's turn off lazy mouse. And now I say this brush size, in essence, is controlling how big that is. Right? So I'm going to say, that's a little too big. Let's go smaller. All right, that's too small. Right? And I find my right one. You could go this route. And that way, anytime I draw, right, this is what I'm getting. I'm getting this size. Right? No matter where I go, that's what I'm getting. So in essence, this is all I'd be doing. And actually, I'm going to do this with symmetry off. Right? So that it can be a little variation to it. Because this is obviously a man-made stitching possibly, or at least there's a machine involved. But I would like to think maybe where Rocketeer's era is, you know, the 30s and 40s. Right? That maybe it's not so machined. There's some man part of it happening. Which for me breaks away from the CG world. Just gives it a little more extra push. And so hopefully you guys can see where I was trying to go with this. Right? And then that's what I want. Because I just want just a little bit of that so it sells in the print that there's a little ridge right there that the buttons went through so that that can button to the front of his jacket. Right? So that's pretty much all I have actually. Okay, so, and on this channel, there are multiple streamers. So there's different people streaming every day going on here. I'm just catching up on the questions. So I see keyboard, you're asking another question. The kind of stuff seems to play a big role in density, doesn't it? If you draw out 50 of these buttons, depending on how dense it is, it could affect performance. I don't know, just thinking. Okay, well, yeah, the density can come into play for sure. I'm only at 47 million for this. That's good enough. I don't need to divide any more than this. 47 million is nothing for the ZBrush world, in essence. And because the buttons now are separated, they can have their own density. Right? I only need these, maybe take these to maybe, you know, like 13, 20,000, and then this is what it would look like. Right? But you guys can also do local dividing as well. So if you really look at this, the only, like, I could care less about dividing this back end, and it might even be worth it to me to delete that back end, because you're never going to see it in the print anyways, right? So why waste that geometry there? Okay? But for those that don't know, there is a way to local divide, okay? So as an example, instead of going up like this much here, right? I can tell ZBrush, you know what? This portion here doesn't need to be divided anymore. I don't need that divided. Okay? So looking at this, I can make it so it only divides this section. So what you do is you mask out this portion that you don't want, right? And now you walk to the lowest subdivision level, and if you hit divide, ZBrush does a local division. So the only thing that's being divided is these portions here. And if you walk down, you'll see it's starting to create triangles here. So if I do that same thing, right? I say that piece I want masked off, and let's divide again. So it's not actually adding now a subdivision level. It's adding more division to the portion that's unmasked, right? And less to the other division. Oh, and it looks like I have UVs on this. I would strongly recommend getting rid of UVs for this. There's no point. I'm not even using them. And I'm wasting memory. I'm wasting time having UVs on it. So this is a really great way for you to look at dividing something up really quick. Okay, I'm just looking at more questions. Go ahead. What's the other question? Make the wrinkles and buttons. I'm not gonna accidentally smooth out the buttonholes. And that's because I am actually putting that on a different surface and a different subtool. So now the buttons are completely a different subtool. They're not linked in any shape, way, or form right now. Okay? And then now I'm only sculpting on this surface, and that's it. Okay? So my local division is not happy right now. It's going too high, and I didn't know I had UVs. See, I can see I have UVs on it, so it's also trying to divide up the UVs right now, and I don't need UVs on this. That's such a waste of memory. And even if you accidentally obviously smooth something out, you know, you obviously can do your undos, or you can use that morph target I showed as well. Right, I'm just trying to catch up and see if there's any questions that I missed as well. Yes, so I see the question. By the way, the thing with the alpha and its depth happens because the baseline that was different for the taller mesh, right? Yes. Yeah. So if you guys understand, if this is like this is the piece, right? This is just the profile. We're looking at the side. Okay. This, if you look from the top, there's a certain depth to it, right? So the first one I did had the depth only so much, right? So that affected the alpha. If I made that taller, I'm making a thicker alpha, which makes a deeper cut in the surface. Does that make sense? So looks like I'm toast. So that's what's happening. Okay? So that is what's going on in here. Oh. I'm going to kill it. I clicked on it a couple, sorry, I clicked on it while it was working. So that's all I have for you. That's it for me. If there's any last minute questions, put them in there right now for me so we can answer those questions for you. Okay. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and watching and keeping an eye on what we're doing in here. And like someone's asking, are there more streams? Absolutely. There's always streams happening in the ZBrush Live world. Okay, so you definitely want to be in there for that too. So make sure you're looking at the schedule here. Okay, so today's Tuesday. So after me later on tonight, Shane Olson, who's a very stylistic, cartoony character guy, he's going to be coming in there next as well. Right, so it looks like our next topic by a landslide is going to be HD geometry. So the next time we do meet, which again, it won't be until January, we'll be doing HD geometry. Okay, any other last minute questions before we call it a Dunsky stream? All right, everyone have a fantastic holiday. Be safe. Enjoy time with some family. Get away from the computer a little bit, right? Oh, wait, I'm just reading someone else's. Hey, the way I made the Rocketeer, those three here, I'll show you since you're asking. Okay, this is all I did. I loaded my tool, my Mr. Rocketeer. So let me get them here. Let's see, bust. Fortunately, we didn't get to the base, but maybe I can throw the base on the next time we meet. Okay, so all I did, and we're going to turn off this big piece. We don't need this on. You can see all the different bases, because the way I made the base was actually a lot of fun. Okay, I'm not in perspective mode, okay, because I want to look straight at profiling viewing, and I just moved him over here, okay, and then I just hit Shift S, and then now it drops it to 2.5D, and then I can do that, and then now I can look at the back of him as well, and then it's there, and that's 2.5D, so you see I can go through it still. So that's just dropping it to the document. So that way I have where I'm at, and I'll use this sometimes as where was I and where am I at now. Okay, did that answer that question? And I don't remember where it went. Okay. If you're using UV master and it's not keeping the creasing when you're cloning and copying, that's code that we have to update and change. There's nothing you can do about it. We got to update the UV master to keep creasing, which I could have swore we did. There might be an update. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions that I missed before we do call it a day? All right, so next time we meet again, we'll do our HD geometry, and then I'll show you guys how I did the base. And hopefully he's done, as long as I can get to him before the new year, but throughout the rest of December here. But obviously I'm going home to my family and spending some time with family, so I don't know how much of him I'm going to be able to get done these next couple weeks. Okay, but I really appreciate you guys stepping in. And then, yes, so what the last one is, you can absolutely use Spotlight as well. So it's a great reference, right? If you have an image of this, you can just bring that in right through a texture and then add it through Spotlight. Absolutely. Great call. No news about any ZBrush releases or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to get going. I got to move on to other meetings, unfortunately. Again, I appreciate it. I hope everyone enjoyed this. And have an amazing holiday. Happy holidays. I'll see you when I see you.